First of all, let me say that this lawsuit with Bob Dylan was no walk in the park. I always stuck to the facts so as not to confuse anything. I never told the inside story. This is part of the inside story. I'm a house painter. I was painting a house for an attorney in North Carolina. He was about my age, very cool guy. I was in his study and I was looking at his CDs, and he had Stevie Ray Vaughan, The Doors, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. He listened to the music that I was interested in. I thought it would be interesting to tell him that I worked with CBS and Bob Dylan's entourage for over 7.5 years as a songwriter. He seemed like he was listening, but then again, he was a very busy man. So it's possible that it went in one ear and out the other. I kept painting his house. One day, a friend of mine from New Jersey called me to tell me that my songs were on Dylan's new album. I went to the record store. I bought the tape. I popped it in my cassette player. And within minutes, I realized that I had the masters to the original creation materials, to the melodies of some of the songs on Dylan's new album in my closet at my home. I called the attorney and told him that my songs were on Dylan's new album. I explained I had the copyrights to the songs and the original creation recordings. He told me to take off the next day and meet him at the office. I went to his office. I showed him the copyrights. I played my songs for him, and I played Dylan's songs for him. His eyes were popping out of his head. Other attorneys got involved and wanted to hear the whole story. So I told them that I had auditioned for John Hammond Sr. and continued working with him and people in Dylan's entourage. Mr. Hammond had signed Bob Dylan to Columbia Records. Mr. Hammond was the executive producer on Stevie Ray Vaughan's first album. They still didn't seem to believe me. I told them I was like family to these people and that I talked to them at least 3 times a week. So one of the lawyers pulls out a tape recorder and puts a little suction cup on the receiver of the phone and tells me to call someone in Dylan's entourage. I called Elliot Mintz. We had a nice conversation. I hung up, and the attorneys told me from now on, record all your calls with CBS or anyone from Dylan's organization. So, for 4.5 years, all my conversations were recorded. During the discovery process of a lawsuit, the plaintiff and the defendant must give all the evidence to each other before the trial takes place. I had 80 conversations. I had to make 3 copies of each conversation, one for the judge, one for the defendants, and one for the record of the court. At the time, I was working 70 hours a week. So I could only do a couple conversations a night. I would come home from work, eat dinner. Then after dinner, I would go over to the tape recorder and make copies. When I got home one night, I noticed that the lock on my front door, which was a deadbolt, turned very easily, which was unusual because it usually was very hard to turn. I didn't think much of it. I was in a hurry, exhausted from working 13 hours, so I continued my schedule. I went back to the lock. I inspected it. I realized someone had broken into my home. My 2 guitars were still there, but the stacks of the conversations were nowhere to be found. I was, however, fortunate. I had a clue that this was going to happen. The clue was that one day I went out to my car and the lock to my front driver's side door was broken. I ran to the trunk to see if they broke into the trunk also, and they did. I immediately got in my car and drove to my other car. And sure enough, the other car's driver's side door handle lock was broken, and the trunk was broken into also. So what I did was I got a duffel bag. I put all the original conversations in the duffel bag. And when I got to work, I locked them in my desk so they couldn't find them. So they broke into my car looking for the original conversations, and they broke into my home. But that was only the beginning.